Okay, here we are now in scene 4 of Act 1. We are returning to the main story after the brief excursion with the secondary family of Laertes, Polonius, and Ophelia. And now we are at the promised moment when Horatio and Marcellus are going to take Hamlet to the guard station in the hopes that the ghost will appear to him just as they appeared to Horatio and Marcellus previously in Act 1, Scene 1. Okay, so we notice a couple things. First of all, just the setting is developed in terms of the coldness and the fact that it is just before just midnight. The clock has just struck. So, and Horatio reminds us that this is just about the time that the Spirit held his wont to walk. This is about the time that the Spirit last went on his walk. Okay, so there's trumpets going off, and it turns out that this is because the current King Claudius is having a sort of outburst. He's taking his rouse. There's a kind of party going on. There's drinking, there's swaggering. He's draining drafts of Rhenish down. So there's just a lot of drinking and partying. Horatio asks about this. Is it a custom? And Hamlet agrees, yeah, it's a custom, but it's a custom more honored in the breach than the observance. What he means by that is it's a custom that we honor more by breaking it rather than actually observing it. So it's not quite a real custom, okay? But it certainly shows a real contrast between the mood in the castle, where there's this rousing, party going on, and then the mood out here on the guard tower, where it's freezing and bleak and cold, and quite spooky. I mean, they're waiting for the appearance of a ghost after all. Okay, so we shift over now, and then the ghost appears. Okay, Hamlet is immediately struck by it. Angels and ministers of grace defend us, and he starts to address it. He addresses it. Look, be thou. Are you a spirit? Whether you're a spirit of a health or a goblin, be thy intent wicked or charitable. Thou comest in such a questionable shape. Questionable meaning it prompts a question. It makes me want to question. And he says, I will speak to thee. I'll call thee Hamlet, King, Father, Royal Dane. Notice, I mean, obviously, Hamlet picks up on the resemblance between the ghost and his deceased father, but he's making an inference here. He wants it to be his father, and so he's going to call it his father. Okay, and he asks the ghost why the bones have burst from the grave, why you haven't stayed in the sepulcher where you were interred. So why has the sepulcher sort of opened its ponderous and marble jaws? What a neat image that is. This idea of the tomb kind of belching forth the soul of the deceased. Hamlet also noticed, look, you're coming here in complete steel, meaning you're in your full armor. And so, he just, again, we saw this from the very beginning of the play. Look at these questions, right? Look at the repeated questions. With thoughts beyond the reaches of our souls, why is this, wherefore, what should we do, right? This is all about an attempt to answer questions, an attempt to reach a level of epistemic certainty, okay? Now, the ghost seems to beckon to Hamlet to come. Horatio notes that. But both Horatio and Marcellus want Hamlet to stay. They're afraid that what might happen if he follows it. Okay? Now, Hamlet, again with a question, what should be the fear, But he starts to talk about, like, actually speaks quite bravely, right? I mean, he's talking about how he doesn't value his life very much, and he's going to follow it, right? He's going to follow this ghost, whatever the risk may be. And so Horatio tries to discourage him. It says, look, the ghost might tempt you towards a flood or towards the summit of a cliff. It might take some form that is frightening and deprive you of your reason. And so we just can't risk it, all right? We can't risk letting you go, Hamlet. But Hamlet insists. He continues to fight with Marcellus and Horatio. And then finally he makes a very bold declaration. He says, my fate cries out and makes each petty artery in this body as hardy as the Nemean lion's nerve, right? Of course, even when he tries to sound as brave, Hamlet can't quite escape the antiquity illusions. And he says, unhand me, gentlemen, right? I mean, the only way it makes sense for him to say, unhand me, gentlemen, is if they have their hands on him, right? So they're trying to hold him back. And yet he says, unhand me. I'll make a ghost of him that lets me, him that keeps me here. And says, and he tells the ghost, go on, I'll follow thee. Okay? So, Marcellus and Horatio agree that they will stay after, follow after Hamlet, that they're not just going to let him go, and they're going to try to stay close to him. But here is the very famous line that probably you've heard before, if you've heard anything about Hamlet, the line, something is rotten in the state of Denmark. This is Marcellus's observation that there's some kind of corruption present here in this state. And we're beginning to see this corruption by the appearance of this ghost. Heaven will direct it. Heaven will direct this state of Denmark. The it here, of course, is ambiguous, though. I mean, heaven could direct the ghost. Heaven could direct the state of Denmark. Heaven could direct what is rotten in the state. There's a tremendous ambiguity about what it is that heaven will direct. But in any case, in these first 92 lines here, what we have is some real examples of bravery and courage from Hamlet. You might call it reckless, but it is not passive. Is something we can say for sure. It may not be wise bravery, but it certainly shows a willingness to act, which is something we need to keep in mind as we witness Hamlet throughout the rest of this play. Okay, so we'll stop there with scene 4, and we'll continue on with scene 5 in a moment.